location, and it serves as the only HBCU located here in Austin. It has a 145-year history here. And the Downs-Jones Library and Archives wanted to honor our ancestors today by celebrating this special day, Juneteenth, creating an avenue to serve our respective communities and learning how to dig and learn about their family histories. Today, we have our guest, Ms. Kymberly Keeton, who is the African American Community Archivist and Librarian at the Austin History Center of the Austin Public Library. She will be sharing an extension of a series of her work that will benefit you in participating today. There are a few housekeeping items that I wanted to share with everyone. Everyone will be muted for the session today. If you do have any questions, just add your questions in the chat box. At 11:30, we will stop the presentation to provide you with an opportunity to have your questions answered. This presentation will be recorded, so we will be sending you a copy of the presentation, and I'll also add a copy of the presentation in the chat box as well. When we finish with the presentation, a survey link will be emailed out to you for feedback. And so without further ado, Ms. Kymberly Keeton.
Good morning, world. How are you doing? Thank you for joining me in my office / creative space / fashionista / my dog is in here with us right now, Roxy Blue. And I just want to say I'm thankful to be with you this morning. Glad that you were able to make it to this presentation. Those who are African American on this call, I think we all have been celebrating Juneteenth for quite a while, but today it kind of feels a little bit extra special. So let's just stay in that energy. And if you don't mind, if we all could just close our eyes and just, whatever you want to chant, whatever you want to say to the ancestors, your ancestors, specifically if you're from Texas as well, let's give ourselves like 30 seconds. Okay, so let's talk genealogy for the next hour and a half. And I am going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm just going to move that down here. I really don't need to. Okay, so today you are going to be intertwined in a discussion / lecture / scholarly presentation. Growing Your Roots 2020 during a global pandemic, using genealogy as a tool, documenting African American families using digital fabrics. The roots are as important as the leaves. So, okay, we're going to move forward. Oh, I'm sorry about that. So the genealogy disclaimer this morning is, in all of us, there is a hunger, marrow deep, to know our heritage, to know who we are and where we came from. Without this enriching knowledge, there is a hollow yearning. No matter what our attainments in life, there is still a vacuum, an emptiness, and the most disquieting loneliness. Alex Haley, Roots. It's an excellent book that you should have in your library. I'll let you look at that quote one more time. and just view the image. This image is of African Americans being transported to the Americas during the Middle Passage. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to get some paper and a pen. Pretty much all of my presentations are interactive. So I want to keep you engaged this morning. So if you could take out a sheet of paper and just follow the prompts and name the following people and include their first, middle, and last name. After you do so, beside each of their names, list where they were born and include city and state. So I'll give you like about 5 minutes to do that. And let's just see if you know the last two for sure, as far as the bullet points. And I would say if there's something that's lacking after this presentation today, this is where you should start the homework in regards to your family history. And this is just a brief start. Do you know your father's first, middle, and last name? Do you know your mother's first, middle, and last name? Do you know that about your grandfather, your grandmother, on both sides of your family? Do you know who your first cousin is on your father's side? Do you know who your second cousin removed is on your mother's side? And do you know their full name?
Kimberly, there's a question. It says any grandmother or grandfather on either side or both sides?
It's either or. I mean, if you know both on both sides, then yes, I would put that information. But I was just stating, you know, grandfather or grandmother.
And what do you mean by who is the second cousin removed?
Your second cousin removed would be, so let's say your first cousin, their child, if they had a child, their child is your second cousin removed. And I have a genealogy, there's a genealogy cousin chart that's a part of this link if you're interested in learning more about cousins and their lineage in your history. Which the first cousin and the second cousin is very important as you begin to do genealogy. Okay, I'm gonna give you 2 more minutes.
The link to this presentation I just posted in the chat.
Okay. And so now we're gonna move forth. Hopefully you have something on a sheet of paper from that exercise. Okay, so I just wanted to also go ahead and get this out the way. Genealogy homework, finding your ancestors on a shoestring budget. So, you know, paying a genealogist per hour can be expensive. And you also want someone who, you know, is willing to work with you where you are in regards to knowing your history. And if you lack that type of funding, then I believe that some of these resources that are listed per this presentation will help you get you going. So my genealogy top 5 as far as creating family trees, as well as learning more about your history. Family Search would be number 1. Heritage Quest would be number 2. Ancestry would be number 3. Roots Finder would be number 4. And Google would be number 5. Now, pretty much all of these entities should be available per your public library. And if you don't have a library card, you need to make sure you have one on Monday of next week so you can access these genealogy resources for free per their edition. So let's say with Ancestry, you don't have a regular Ancestry account. You can create one through the public library and download documents that way versus having to pay them with a personal account. Heritage Quest is free through your public library system as well. Roots Finder is something that you would access independently. Family Search is something that you would access independently, as well as Google. Now, when you look at your, you go to the right of the screen, Black Gen sources you can use, Reclaim the Records, Genealogy Cheat Sheets, Genealogy LibGuides, Generations Past, the Portal to Texas History, Juneteenth, and the 1619 Project. I would say start from the bottom going up, because if you are not aware of your history as it pertains to the continent of Africa through the Middle Passage, coming to the Virginia colonies, then I think it's important that you start out that way in reading about history so you can understand where African American people migrated to once they got to these shores of the Americas. Another good source would be the Portal to Texas History if you are researching Texas history only. It has a plethora of different resources that you can find, including images, documents, speeches, etc., etc. All of the other resources will help you out in your search as well. So please make sure that you click on these, and this PDF will be available to you after the presentation. Okay, Southern genealogy roots, what you need to know historically. The first captives came to the Western Hemisphere in the early 1500s. 20 African slaves were brought to Jamestown, Virginia in 1619. A series of complex colonial laws began to relegate the status of Africans and their descendants to slavery. The United States outlawed the transatlantic slave trade in 1808, but the domestic slave trade and illegal importation continued for several decades. Now, in this presentation, I am specifically focusing on Texas history. But I do want to make everyone aware of Texas's history, being that Texas was not Texas, it was Mexico. Then it became Texas, and we'll get to that point. Now, as it pertains to this being Mexico, the Mexican government was opposed to slavery, but even so, there were 5,000 slaves in Texas by the time of the Texas Revolution in 1836. By the time of annexation, a decade later, there were 30,000. By 1860, the census found 182,566 slaves, over 30% of the total population of the state. And if you're interested in learning more about African American sailors that were a part of the Civil War, this is a link that you might be interested in reading about. Okay, so again, remember, Texas was Mexico first, okay? And one of the things that I think is very important in regards to genealogy and fabrics, as far as looking at different instances of what you can feature on a website platform or at a family reunion in a presentation, is looking at the battle for Texas and slavery and the Great Migration. To the right of the screen, it gives you all of the wars that happened before Texas became Texas. And I'll let you look at those. And I would suggest that you go through each one of these wars and look for your history, your family history. There are a lot of Afro-Mexicans that basically were born in Mexico, decided to move to Texas, and vice versa. And I just think this is very important for people to understand how Texas became Texas. And so where we are right now in this moment is right here, the Civil War era, 1861 to 1865, and why we are celebrating what we're celebrating today, which we've been really celebrating it since 1865 in Texas. And I want to make sure that people understand the importance of knowing your history. The reason why you're celebrating Juneteenth is because African American people in the state of Texas only were not told that they were free in 1863. So people in New York City, Delaware, California, Missouri, Oklahoma, all these different areas were free per paper. We're going to say on paper, except slaves in Texas. Below this information on this proclamation, there's a Juneteenth LibGuide that I think you might be interested in that just came out yesterday, which was created by Elizabeth Brumfield, the Distance Services Librarian at the John B. Coleman Library at Prairie View A&M University. Once the presentation is over, or if you're at your computer now, you can click on this link and there are a plethora of resources as it pertains to Juneteenth. And so I wanted to play this excerpt from Blackish about Juneteenth, and hopefully that will work.
Go ahead.
You may have to turn up the video. Is the volume up?
You can't hear it?
No, is the volume up on your video on YouTube?
Oh, it's not.
I could swing from a tree, but hey, oh, I hope and pray they don't kill me today. I am still just a slave.
If the Emancipation Proclamation was passed in 1863, why weren't you free until 1865?
Well, it took 2 years for the Civil War to end.
Oh, so you were free when the war ended.
Not for 2 more months because Texas landowners wanted another harvest.
That's not cool.
None of it was cool. But an army ship arrived on June 19, 1865 and announced we were free. That's why we celebrate Juneteenth. I am a slave in the home of the brave, a product of the triangular trade. Please pardon my way if I'm nervous or the slightest bit skittish in the presence of the Portuguese, Spanish, Dutch, or British. They kept me in colonial chains. Tell me how to persuade them to chill or to save me and still I'm a slave.
So that is the legendary Roots crew, and that's an excerpt from the show Blackish. And I just thought that felt really good to put that in, being a part of the hip hop generation. So moving forward with this brief excerpt about Juneteenth that we wanted to make sure we share with you today. So the images that I have in here right now, I'm very proud of because I have gotten phone calls like for the past 2 weeks from National Geographic, from all different types of media outlets in the country wanting licensing for the images that you have been seeing across the internet. And most people just think that they just came from wherever, but these images actually originated in the state capital of Texas, Austin, Texas, Travis County in particular. So this image here you see is a shot from Juneteenth celebration in 1900 at Eastwoods Park, which was a part of Wheatville, a Black community that has since been demolished based on UT Austin having its place in history. We'll say it like that today. Next, you will see, I'm sorry, go back. Next, you will see a reenactment of what took place during that time. Civil War reenactors at a Juneteenth celebration at Eastwoods Park in 1900. So whenever you see these images across the internet, please remember that these images originated from Austin, Texas. And this is a picnic at Eastwoods Park for Juneteenth celebration, same year. Here's another image, Civil War reenactors at Juneteenth celebration at Eastwoods Park in 1900. So now we're going to go ahead and go into more of the presentation. And we're going to start out with the fabric. Take notes. Tell your family history through images, text, and creativity. And so if you look to the right of the screen, we're starting out with images, pictures, programs, rare documents, maps. One thing that you should do when it comes to genealogy, if you're creating a web platform, if you're putting a scrapbook together, or if you're putting together a presentation for a family reunion, ask family members for permission to digitize genealogy memorabilia that they have collected. Know that it's very important in the times that we live in a new decade, that you should be digitizing your genealogy. You should be digitizing your history. Like, yes, you should have a scrapbook. You should have books written and tucked away in a chest, but you also should have something that people can migrate to online. Text is always important. Community, personal, family, professional. Write your family history. Create poems, blogs, books, etc. Creativity. Family web platforms, and these are different sites that you can use for free to share your genealogy with your family privately, or you can open it up to the world as an open access feed, which you can use wordpress.com, Tumblr, Instagram.com, and there are plenty more sites that you can use to be able to do this as far as sharing your history online. So one of the things is, this is my particular site, which a lot of my history is embedded within this presentation. I think it's the best way to share your history with others. When I learned about, I would say, pretty much all of my history in a weekend with my aunt. Not to say that I didn't know, but she just reminded me of a lot of different things. And she passed in 2015. So I decided to create a documentation that my family could have for generations. So it's called The Southern Migration of the Keeton and Schaefer family. And please know that the Keeton family has other surnames, just as the Schaefer family does. And so that link is here for you to go inside of the site and to check it out if you like. And this is just a few things that I've focused on thus far. So these are, when I'm speaking about images, you know, going back in time and finding different images that you think are charismatic, that, you know, shows different sides of your family. These are images that are out of my family's scrapbook. Okay, the digital doc, taking notes. Turn your archive into a living story for generations to come. So again, you just saw images, which are very important. One thing that I want to add right now, and let me go back really quick, because I want you to see this. This image here came from the Black Schomburg's digital collection that is open to the public. It's a public domain full of different images from the 1800s all the way up until present day that you can access for free and include in your digital platforms if you want to have something such as this, as far as not just showing your history, but sharing African American history in general. Which it also, like, you know, it adds a different flair to your digital platforms. Turn your archive into a living story for generations to come. Become the go-to family historian. So again, using the Southern migration of the Keeton and Schaefer family, one thing that I did was I sat back and I thought about how I could open up the website, what would be a good way of sharing the history so people would be interested in my family and learning more about my family. I sat down and I wrote a piece about when I traveled to Ghana, West Africa, and what that did for me then, and you know what it has done and how it has impacted my life thus far. And I think it was a good segue into me really understanding why I was doing this work, why I became a librarian, why I became an archivist, and the importance of not only helping other people, you know, learn about their history, but also knowing my own history and sharing it with you. So in a situation such as this, how we're convening today, you're understanding why I'm passionate about my own history. One of the things that I think is very important, if you don't know, and hopefully you have your ink pen out right now, is that you have the opportunity to archive your history with the Library of Congress for free. If you're interested in doing that, you can access an ISSN. I is in igloo, S is in Sam, S is in Sam, N is in Nancy, which is an international serials number. And you can Google that right now if you're interested. And what you would do is fill out the application and you would send it in to them. You would share your digital project, which you see right now, and you send that in via email. They're going to email you back an ISSN number, which when you go to this site, the Southern Migration.wordpress.com, again, the Southern Migration.wordpress.com, when you click on the site, to the left of the screen, you're going to see the ISSN number. Okay, what does that ISSN number do? That number is a tracking number that whenever you want to go to Washington, D.C., or you want to share your history with other people, you give them that number, you go to the Library of Congress, they bring up your family history. And it's another way of your family being documented in these United States, which I think is so important. So again, that is a ISSN number. It's free to anyone who is interested. However, this has to be something when it comes to the digital component, it has to be something that you're always updating. So you have to always be updating your site, not every day, but you know, ever so often within the year. You can also publish scrapbooks. You have to have at least 2 to 3 scrapbooks for them to be able to archive for you, and you do have to send them copies. So when you look up that information, it goes more into detail as to what you have to do to get that ISSN number. And you know, this is just another way of just showing creativity, also showing, you know, census records. In this particular section of the site for the Southern Migration, I'm showing you census records for one particular family and how many census records we have for this particular family, the Schaefer family. Okay, so when you're looking at important documents, which is another I would say another fabric that you can use to enhance what your site looks like, what your project looks like. Remember, this is about different fabrics that you can use to make your platform more user-friendly and more inviting, and also to show that you've done the work. So in particular, this family, the Taylor family, how I came about to know the Taylor family, and you see on the left side, this is the 1860 census, and on to the right side, you see the 1870 census. So you have to remember that African American people were not considered human until 1870 in the census records. Now, if you go back to 1869, all the way to 1860, going back, you may find some of your people on census records. It's very rare, because before 1870, okay, Juneteenth happened, we were free, but we have to be very clear, right after 1865, Reconstruction happened. So some black people went right back into slavery. Some people went right back into being tenant farmers. You know, this whole 40 acres and a mule idea came about, but that didn't happen. But again, let me go back, because I want you to see that we had a free family. Thank God I was able to find a free family in my family at that time in 1860, but this is through another family. So my last name is Keeton. What generation? My third generation grandfather was Doc Keeton from Fairfield, Texas. He married Emma Taylor. Okay, he passed away. Emma Taylor married into the Taylor family. And I started researching the Taylor family and was just like amazed. They're all from Houston, Texas. And I started going back into the census documents, and I was like, this is a free family in 1860. So to the left of the screen, 1860, this is a free family. 1870, their names became a little bit more legible. Another thing that I want to share with you is that please remember, when you're looking at census records, when you're doing this work with census records, that white people were the enumerators. So, you know, think of your last name right now. If your last name is Keeton, which my last name is Keeton, it can be spelled like, you can write this down right now, Keton, Keeeton, Keaton, Khuton. Like there's so many different ways that your last name can be spelled. So do not let that deter you from doing the work. You just have to understand that we were not considered human. And after 1870, we still weren't considered human when you start really looking at the census documents, because of the ways that our names were spelled. You know, sometimes they said we were from Texas and we were actually from New York, because they weren't listening, because they didn't care about Black people. It was a job for them. So when you get into the census records, know these are beautiful documents, and they speak so much to what has happened to your people. One more point about the census records, because I'm talking about this from the framework of a fabric, something that you can share. But as you're doing the work as a genealogy guru, please study these documents. Read everything on the documents. Also, follow the neighbors. Follow the neighbors. Like, just don't look at the census document and be like, oh, I just found my family and that's it. No, follow those people that are under them, because typically those are your cousins. Typically you're married into those families. And go all the way to the front of the census year that you're looking at, and go all the way to the end. And I guarantee you're going to find your family all over those records in that particular year. Also, if you're interested in census records in the 1700s, they are available. And you can email me about that and I can send you a link. for you to be able to look at those records for the 1700s as far as Texas is concerned. And they are available online for you to view. Okay, moving forward. Remember, we're looking at fabrics, different things that you can find to share with your family, with your friends. If you're a scholar, you know, this could be your scholarly platform or a part of your research. So Aaron Keeton is my 7th generation grandfather. And, you know, the Keetons, we have a mighty legacy coming out of Texas. My family was a part of building a freedom colony in East Texas. And it's just a mighty history to read about. We've been written about in books as well. But what I want to share about Aaron Keeton is that in 1865, he was free, but he was still a tenant farmer, kind of, because they own land, but of course he was trying to make his own way into the world. And the person that he was working for was a part of the Freedoms Bureau. So the Freedoms Bureau hired white farmers to hire tenant farmers. So it was an interesting system that was going on. But thank God for the Freedoms Bureau, because had they not been around, my 7th generation grandfather probably would have been killed by the person that he was working for. And I'll just say that I found like about 3 documents in which my grandfather was nearly beat to death by this white man that he was renting land from. He was able to get out the situation, and I'm glad he continued his work, because he also is documented in history as having his own brand for his cattle. And this, if you look at the document, the second brand is my 7th generation's grandfather, the second one. And if you look at that A and then you see that K, it's just like, I got a big smile on my face right now. And it also, you know, one of the things about, just learning more about your history and me learning these things is like, now I understand why I'm an entrepreneur, not just a professional, but I'm an entrepreneur too. Like, I understand why I walk with my shoulders so high, because look at what we're looking at right now. This is in the 1800s. The Keetons were already thinking and already entrepreneurs. So now I understand why that spirit is embedded within me. And of course, if you want to see the reference and you want to go see it for yourself, it's over here in the right hand corner to the bottom of the screen. Okay, so, I know I'm gonna get married one day, because look at this record right here. Like, when I found this, I was just like, oh, and they were writing in cursive? Like, it's beautiful. The Sherrill family, which is a part of my grandmother's lineage on my mother's side. This is my 6th generation grandfather and 6th generation grandmother, who were from North Carolina and migrated to Texas. Half of that story is about slavery, the other half is about freedom. But I just wanted you to see the records, these records right here. And if you want to know which one, is to the left of the screen, and it's the second paragraph. And this is something else that's another fabric that you will want to share with your family. These are just, what I'm showing you today are just different things that you can look at to put into a presentation, to put on your website, to share in a scholarly presentation. You can look at this one document and write a 10-page paper about this one document. Of course, you got to have your methodology. You have to know, why are we looking at these records, et cetera, et cetera. Having your quantitative and qualitative information, pretty much qualitative, but it could be quantitative too, depending upon how many African Americans were married during that year. Okay, so George Washington Sherrill, my 5th generation granddad. So I mean, I searched for him. I don't know. I was in Missouri when I was searching for him, and I found out so much about Mr. George Washington Sherrill. But I wanted to share this World War II draft registration. And I want you to look at the age. He was 64 years old. They still were recruiting African Americans at 64 years old to serve in the United States Army. Elroy Sherrill is my uncle. He served in World War II in the Navy. George Sherrill is his father. Elroy Sherrill was married to my Aunt Fannie, Fannie Mae Sherrill. Their house is 1 street over from Dunbar High School in Fort Worth, Texas. They were philanthropists. They're one of the reasons why Dunbar High School exists today. Oh, but when I found George Washington Sherrill's grave marker in Oklahoma, it was a bittersweet moment because I was just moving back to Texas from Missouri, and I found his grave marker when I came to Austin. And I was just like, I've been traveling back and forth from Missouri, crossing over the border to Oklahoma, and I could have went to go see this marker, but I'm gonna go back. I mean, Oklahoma is nowhere from Texas. But I just wanted you to see the age, and I wanted you to see an original World War II draft registration card. And I have World War I. You know, we can go back a few more wars as well. But this is one that's legible. You can really see everything. It's clear. Remember, when you find documents such as this, look at everything on the document. And look at that signature. Like, I was like, okay, he wrote pretty cool signature going on. The digital doc. So now we're going to look at different things that you can use outside of your history, which is still part of your history. So we're going to look at the Negro Green Book, in honor of the Negro Green Book, Austin's documentation, and then we're going to look at African American preservation, the history of a house. So if you haven't heard about the Green Book, the Negro Green Book was a set of books that were created to help African Americans migrate and navigate through these United States from all over the United States, as it pertains to, you know, traveling from Texas, going to New York. Where could you eat? Where could you get gas? Because remember, you know, these United States was segregated up until the 1960s, let's say 1965, okay? And it's still places that we can't go and not welcome. But these books helped many African Americans be able to travel, you know, to get outside of the states that they lived in, or the cities that they lived in, or the counties that they lived in. And, you know, these books are available to you for free online. So I have that link up. You can look for your state and look at, you know, for your particular city that you lived in or that you were from, and see what different entities were open for African American people to be able to migrate to, navigate to, drive to, et cetera, et cetera. And this included hotels, this included, you know, gas stations, grocery stores, beauty shops, anything that you could think of, the Green Book provided. Okay, so, you know, a lot of people say the Negro Green Book came out in the early 1930s, which it did, but there was also another Green Book Negro Green Book that was in the making in Austin, Texas. Friendly West, Johnny West. Friendly West was the second Black principal of Blackshear Elementary. Johnny, her family is from Houston, Texas. If you know of Jack Yates High School, her grandfather, that's his name. So she's a Yates. That's her maiden name. And if you don't know anything about the Jack Yates alumni, high school, et cetera, you definitely need to think about 2 weeks ago. And if you heard the name of George Floyd, he attended that high school. Friendly West did a lot in Texas. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. Somebody just texted me something about a name. I'm sorry. I'll correct that in a minute. I'm sorry. Oh my God. Oh my God. I am so sorry. Friendly Rice. Friendly Rice. Please forgive me. Friendly Rice. So Friendly Rice, Johnny Rice, and thank you to that community member for texting me. Again, two important people in Austin's history who, I mean, did so much for the Black community. Friendly Rice not only was the principal for Blackshear, but also was one of the major reasons why there were a lot of African Americans who were able to teach, not just in Austin, but in Dallas, Houston. He was a major part of Prairie View A&M University as far as their library education program, their teaching education programs, and making sure that African Americans graduated from these programs. Moving forth, so what is significant about this Negro Green Book? Well, he took the time to write down pretty much every time he traveled to New York, every time he traveled to Alabama, and he wrote down these different occurrences when he was stopped by the police, you know, when he stopped to eat, him and his wife and his daughter. It's just an amazing, I think, documentation with his handwriting that you can view in the 20th century and just see from whence we came, but also what we're still going through. And so if you click on this image right here, you can access all of those books that were digitized by myself and the photography archivist at the Austin History Center. And what's so significant in today is that we debuted these books Juneteenth 2019, which is also the anniversary of 1619. The 1619 project, I'm sorry. Okay, so moving forward, African American historic preservation. This is another fabric that you can use to discuss with your family or put in a presentation or a digital platform. African American historic preservation, like, I mean, you know, it's very important to know, you know, the environment that you live in, knowing where some of the historical markers are situated as far as African American history. You know, possibly you may want to be involved in regards to certain different organizations to make sure that African American history is being preserved and being recognized, not just by the city and the county, but by the state. So let's look at my history again. So when I was in Missouri and I was looking at George Searles, who you just read briefly about and saw his World War II registration draft document, I was looking at his death certificate, and it led me to someone else's death certificate, and we'll get to find out who she is. So that's my great 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 aunt Ella Sherrill. So I'm looking at Ella Sherrill's, but it actually said Ella Neal on her death certificate. So I'm looking at it and I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, I know there's an Ella and I know he has a, you know, it's her name is Ella. Who is she? And why is his name on her death certificate, George, as well as Stella Wells? So I kept this document, Ella's death certificate, and I did all the research on her, found out, you know, I know she's a part of my family history, but who is this person, the informant? And I know it was God, and I want you to know that God is always a part of this process as far as genealogy is concerned. You know, sometimes you have to pray, sometimes you have to call on him, you know, sometimes you have to ask why there is a brick wall, and maybe it's a brick wall for a reason because you're not supposed to go through it, but most of the time you're supposed to get through it. It's just not time for you to know that history, or you may not be ready. So, you know, I'm in Missouri, I'm at Lincoln University, the only institution in the state capital, and it's an HBCU. And I'm just like, okay, you know, all of this is coming at me. My aunt gave me all this information and I got to figure this out. Who is Stella Wells? Who is Stella Wells? So come to Austin, Texas, and I started looking in city directories, which will be your best friend if you're doing genealogy on a regular basis. I'm looking in city directories and I find the address for this house that you see right here. So I was like, okay, well, I have the address. Let me just go by and see if the house is still standing. Now, I just moved to Austin, Texas in August of 2018. Okay, so I drive around and the house is still standing. So I was like, okay, well, I wonder who lives in there today. Because this is like the information that I'm looking at, like this house was built like in 1900, 1920, that you're looking at right now, which is still standing on the east side, Black East Austin. So, you know, I'm looking and I was like, something told me one day, which I know it was God, was like, just go put Stella Wells' name in just put it in Google. I'll put it in Google. And I just want you to look at this right here. Just look at these questions. Put it in Google, and some site came up and it had her phone number on it. And I was like, okay, well, let me chance it. So, but before I did a search on her. Come to find out that Willie Wells was her father. Willie Wells is one of the greatest Negro baseball players in our history. He's in the Hall of Fame. He's in the Texas Hall of Fame. He's also buried in the Texas State Cemetery. So, you know, I'm like, okay, but how does she connect with, you know, the Sherrill family and Ella? Okay, I'm gonna come back to the genealogy of her house. So this is Stella Wells right here. Okay, and let me read this to you. Ella Sherrill is Stella Lee Wells' grandmother. Remember Ella Neal? Ella Sherrill. Ella Neal was married. That was her married name. Neal. Sherrill is her maiden name. Ella Sherrill is Stella Lee Wells' grandmother. Ella Sherrill and George Sherrill were brother and sister. Stella was born in Lockhart, Caldwell, Texas. Stella's mother, Clara, was formerly married to Willie Wells. Willie Wells was the baseball player. And she is my great-grandmother's first cousin, my great-grandmother being Betty Jean Sherrill. Ella Sherrill and my great-great-grandfather, George Sherrill, are sister and brother. She moved to Austin, Texas in the early 1900s from Lockhart and Caldwell. George Sherrill is my great-grandmother's father and my maternal grandmother's grandfather. My great-grandmother, her name was Mary Ella Sherrill. So you get Mary Ella, like it just starts to click, people. When you start doing it, it starts to click. Ella Sherrill passed down her home in Austin, Texas to Stella Lee Wells in 1971. How did I find that out? Okay, so let me go back. When you're looking at the genealogy of a house, let's just say a house, you know, the house you live in now, these are some of the questions that you should ask yourself. If you're looking at this being a fabric for your genealogy project, for your, you know, platform that you're going to share with the world. What year is the house built? Who designed the house? Who built the house? Who lived in the house? Look for photos of the house. Some records to keep in mind: newspapers and books, deeds and maps, census records, city directories, the National Register database, which is free. The National Register database is free. Okay, going forward. Like, she's so pretty. So let me just finish that little story real quick. So, you know, I pick up the phone and I call Stella, and she answered. 98 years old. This was last year, 2019, May. She answers the phone, and I'm telling her who I am. And I'm like, you know, can I come by and say hello? And she was like, yes, baby, come by. And I go by, and I was kind of apprehensive, and her caretaker really didn't want me there, being that she really didn't know who I was, the caretaker. But Stella told her, let her in. So I go in her room, and she's laying in the bed, 98 years old, has all this gray hair. And like, that's why I don't want to cut my gray hair off, because it's just like, it's just, oh, Lord, it's just regal. She's laying there with these big blue eyes. And I will just never forget what she said to me. She was like, you finally made it. How you doing? And I just sat there for a moment. And I just stood and I started crying, because I couldn't believe that, you know, my work was being validated. And we just started talking, and she just, you could just tell she was so happy. She was so happy. And do you know, she died July 5th, 2019. So I got to meet her in May 2019, and she passed July 5th, 2019. And all of my work that I have been doing since 2011 have been validated through this lady that you're looking at right now. Don't stop the work. Don't stop. Keep going. You got to keep going. Clues about the house that you just saw. So, you know, I wanted to know more about the home. And I just started doing newspaper searches. These are some of the things that I found. And, you know, when you find these records, look at Ella Cofield Neal. She was, you know, just look at these names, like play with the names, you know, look at the different cities. Just look at all the information and don't let it go. Put it somewhere. Now, if you want to know what a house originally looks like, you can use the Sanborn maps, which are some very important maps that are available at the Austin History Center, pretty much any research center in the United States, and they're available online too for free. This is the Sanborn, just like a replica of the Sanborn maps, just to let you know what it looks like for the state of Texas. And I'll let you read this for yourself. And so the reason why you want to look at the Sanborn maps is because they can tell you where your house originally was situated, you know, what year, I mean, it narrows it down to the block of where that home was, if it was recorded in the Sanborn fire insurance maps. Okay, the digital doc, take notes, take notes. Black genealogy resources. Again, platforms that you can use in regards to the fabrics that we talked about today: pictures, text, documents, preservation, documents outside of your history, which will complement your history. Some platforms that you can use, again, WordPress, Tumblr, Wix. Here are a few different resources that I thought you might be interested in using. Of course, you can click on here if you're in the Southern Migration of the Keeton and Schaefer family. That link is here if you're interested in looking at my history in particular and how I archived my history and continuously doing so. These are some of the best sites to use as it pertains to Texas history. And as a genealogist, I use these sites on a regular basis as it pertains to Texas's history. And these are all pretty much free resources too. So I'm going to leave you with a few quotes. A child doesn't belong to the mother or father. A child belongs to his ancestors. A parent should not give up modeling their children because the ancestors never gave up on us. As you do for your ancestors, your children will do for you. Blessings of ancestors are greater than those of living human beings. Children are the reward of life. Dreams are voices of ancestors. If you know his father and grandfather, you may trust his son. If you lie, the ancestors will punish you. It is better to be kind to your neighbors than to cross the world to offer incense to your ancestors. Many births mean many burials. More precious than our children are the children of our children. And these are all African quotes that I researched, in particular for this presentation today. I would like to thank you for taking your time listening to me today about learning about digital fabrics that you can use as genealogy tools to teach, young children in your family, teenagers moving forth, just whomever you think might be interested in learning about your history as well as yourself. So I will give the platform back to Director McGee.
Thank you so much, Kymberly. You did such a great job. Do you all want to give her a round of applause? I know you can hear it, but great job. So we had a few questions, throughout the presentation, so we'll kind of be backtracking just a little bit. But just to remind everyone who is here in this Zoom meeting, the recording, it will be recorded. There was a question about that. And we will email it out to you for those who registered, and also the slides for the presentation. So that has also been shared in the chat as well. Another question is, who is your first cousin if your parent does not have a sibling?
Ooh, let me write that down. Who is your first cousin if your parent doesn't?
So to go back to, I think it was the slide where you asked to write down the grandparent's name.
So if your parents don't have a sibling, then you're gonna look at your grandparents' cousin. That's who you're gonna look at. And they're gonna be a first cousin removed. No, they're probably gonna be a third generation cousin removed. Either second generation or third generation cousin removed. But it would still be in that lineage. That's why you need to download that chart about cousins, because it gets tricky when it comes to cousins. But I will tell whoever asked that question, it is an important question, because typically if, say, your parents are no longer living and your aunts and uncles, are not on this earth, your first cousin or that second cousin removed or that second cousin is gonna pretty much know your family history, and you need to know them. So that may be some homework you may need to do today, is knowing your first cousin or finding your grandparents' cousins. That cousin lineage, that's something else though when you look at a family tree. Because you have your step cousins and all that kind of stuff too that goes into that.
Okay. Linda Barrett she commented in the chat and mentioned that many public libraries have temporary remote access to Ancestry.com through July 30th due to closures because of COVID. So just FYI to everyone, if you want to use that tool and you have access to your public libraries, that is something you should have access to.
I also want to add to that, as you travel, because I have 5 library cards. I have a library card for the San Francisco library system. I have a library card for, the county that I live in. And I have 3 other library cards. I have one for the Library of Congress. So when you travel, go to different public libraries and, visit the main library downtown. You may have to pay a fee, but get a library card because they also offer different services versus what your public library offers. So just case in point, in San Francisco, they offer Ancestry for free that you can use at home every day. Versus in Texas, they're only doing it based off of COVID-19, the COVID-19. That's why it's being available right now. So just to let you know that as you travel, if you're interested in doing this work and you're thinking about funding and not being able to pay a genealogist or to be able to download records, et cetera, getting public library cards from other cities is always another resource.
Okay, so another question was when you were just sharing about the Great Migration. Question here says the Great Migration listed on that slide, it included the migration of former enslaved people who migrated north and northwest, or was it just Texas?
No, the South. It was the South in particular. I mean, it started in Texas, pretty much started in Texas, due to there was a, how could I frame this? So African Americans were free. Many of them were tired of being tenant farmers, and as well as there was an influx of insects that took over from crops. So as far as the economy in Texas at that time, many people had to leave based upon wanting to leave the South and due to a lack of employment. So it started in Texas, but there are a lot of people in the Midwest, the North, that are from Alabama, Mississippi, but their loins are from the South.
Okay, and so she mentions, to clarify, her family migrated from South Carolina to North and Northwest. So she wanted to know if what you're talking about referred specifically to Texas or to the South in general.
No, I mean there were people that migrated to, and when we're talking about we're talking about the North, but we're kind of mainly talking about, when you're talking about the Great Migration, you're talking about Chicago. Many Black people went to Chicago. That's where they migrated to. Many went to the North, but a lot went to Chicago. There was an influx of people from the South that went to Chicago. Now, as far as South Carolina and North Carolina, I mean, that's probably local history that she would be able to find. I would say she could actually go to North Carolina A&T and read about some of that history as far as HBCUs. In North Carolina, there are like about 5 that are right next to each other that you can frequent, as well as going to some different research centers. I know there's a new museum that has opened in South Carolina that you probably be able to frequent as well, which is an African American institution. that you can find out more about that history. But yes, it wasn't just Texas, but it started with Texas. Texas got it started as far as that migration.
Are there any other migration resources that you're familiar with? Resources such as people living in Oklahoma during the 1880s and settled in
Well,
Texas during the early 1900s? Or where should they look for that
the
source?
one thing that you definitely should have in your library is The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson. I'm
Yes.
going to say that again. The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson, which she is going to be a part of the Austin Black Book Festival next weekend, and she's the keynote speaker. So if you haven't signed up for that, you need to do that today. And just to let you know, I'm the last presenter. So, but I'll be talking about something totally different as far as archiving your history with the Black COVID-19 index. So again, Isabel Wilkerson, her book is entitled The Warmth of Other Suns. You should purchase that book today. And she gives you the historical compass. You can also go to her TED Talk, TED Talk via YouTube, which is another great resource. But Isabel Wilkerson is the goddess when it comes to learning about the Great Migration. And she covers every corner of the spectrum in regards to the Great Migration, why it happened, where people migrated to, and she specifically talks about the question that you're asking me about. And the book is probably, I think it's like about 500 pages. And you can go to the Austin African American Book Festival website, which is AAABF.org. Again, that's A as in apple, A as in apple, A as in apple, B as in black, F as in festival.org to sign up for that. And there are going to be 4 free Zoom sessions. And again, Isabel Wilkerson is the keynote. So if you want to learn more about the Great Migration, that would be something, you know, that you should participate in, and it's free.
Okay, the next question here is the Freedomsboro different from the Freedmen'sboro?
Okay, say that again, please.
Is the Freedomsboro different from the Freedmen'sboro? Did I say that right? I always get borough.
Is the Freedomsboro different than the Freedomsboro?
Freedomsboro different from the Freedmen'sboro?
No, it's called the Freedmen's Bureau. It's the same thing. You're just pronouncing it. They're pronouncing it differently.
Okay.
And spelling it differently. You're spelling one with an A-N-S, and then you're spelling one with an E-N-S.
Got it.
But it's Freedmen's, men's plural. Dr. Smoot, you look like you just really studying. Al Dennis, I see you over there. I see Miss Gilmore. Y'all really in tune. And I see somebody, she has N-I-C-H-E, but she in tune with something right now. Good to see y'all today.
Let me see. Where do you find Okay, the next question is, where do you find the records of marks and brands?
You're just gonna go to that right there. You're gonna have to go to a research center and just ask them for a book. What you just asked me. Do you have a book of brands? Do you have a book of what is the word? What is the word? What is the word? What is it? I can't think of the word right now. Danielle, help me. What's the word?
Which book?
Marks and brands, but it's another word to use for it. that we use in the 20th century today? I can't think right now.
Like trademark?
Well, yeah, yeah, it would be trademarks today. But if you're going back in history, the question that you ask is exactly what you should ask them. And I would say that what I have in regards to my great grandfather, so this book right here it's just what you just asked me. Record book of marks and brands. So some things that we have questions about is that simple. And don't be afraid to ask that question too, because there's no, every question is important to a certain extent.
I'm not sure how or what this question says, but it says, while chatting with my in-laws, I was told a great-grandmother, I believe, maybe a second great-grandmother, was rumored to be a madam. Any particular resource good to research that?
A madam as in a madam that was a madam in a home? When you're saying madam, are you saying a madam that ran a house? Because that's what madam means to me.
Yeah, ran a house. Yes, ran a house.
Whoa, that's like, you guys, I want to know about your history. Okay, where would you find out? Okay, I mean, you would do the same thing. You would do, and I would look at the prison records too, to see if she actually was, if something happened in regards to her being over a home in that caliber. And what history, what era are you talking about? Are you talking about the early 1800s? Because if you're talking about the 1800s, that happened. If you're talking about the 1900s, like after 1950, no, it would be something else. But before that, I would look at the antebellum period, pretty much, depending upon if they're from the South. Let's say they were in Louisiana. I mean, I would just have talks with family members, because I don't think any of that information would be written down unless they wrote a journal, had a diary, wrote some papers, shared that information with family members, or if you can find some old receipts where they were maybe running numbers. I think talking with your elders in your family is really going to help you out with that. And then just if you have the last name, I would do a Google search. The way you would do that is go to Google. And this is for everybody who does genealogy. If you don't use Google as a resource, you should. You're going to use open quotations and you're going to put Madam, Madam Butterfly, and you're going to put close quotations. And then you can put, San Francisco, open quotations, comma, California, close quotations, and Google will do a search and narrow it down in those strings for you. Without the quotations, though, it just gives you information from everywhere. But if you use those quotations, then you're kind of manipulating the database to give you exactly what you're looking for. But as far as madams, then I would read about madams. And, I would go to, different bookstores. I mean, just reading about madams, because you may find them in a book. And then pray about it, Are you supposed to know about her in that way? But I would go search for them, if it were me, because I think it's interesting.
Okay. The next question is, I recently discovered an aunt through Ancestry, but her identity was confirmed through a family Bible. Is there an archive of family Bibles?
It depends on where you're from. And there should be a theological institution that you can visit in any state to look at their collection of Bibles. You can go to, I would try out my, the closest university academic library in your area, and I would go talk with the reference librarian there. Also, the state archivist would be a good contact for that. But typically, there is a theological seminary in every state, and you should be able to contact them to see if they have a collection of Bibles. But you can also look it up online too.
Okay. This is a library question. It says, how are you able to get library, I'm assuming they meant library cards from other cities when they ask for your address?
Okay, so then that's when you have to put a smile on your face and tell them what you're doing, you know, and you're interested in being a part of their library. You know, you're interested in their library. And like I said, typically there is a fee, and it just depends on who's sitting at the desk that day. But I mean, just let them know what you're trying to do, explain what you're trying to do, and typically you can get a library card. I know in San Francisco, I didn't have to put my address. They use a address. I think she actually came up with the address and put it in the system. But they may ask for your address and they may not. But it's not something that, you know, I mean, it's available to you. It's just you may have to pay a fee. But typically the librarian on duty will give you a library card for free. It's not something that they do every day. So it's not something that, you know, it just takes a second to give someone a library card.
The next question is, where can I look for a family member that I can't find in any of the census records?
Where can you find a family member? Where can you find a family member and you can't find them in any census records? So are you saying that you don't have any information about them, you just have their name? Because then I would ask you, have you contacted vital records? Have you looked for vital records in your state? Have you applied for those records for that person, since you couldn't find them in the census records? And did you look up their social security card? Did you have a conversation with someone in your family? Did you have a conversation with the last living elder in your family?
Kelly
And
Hawkins.
did you, and then also go back through the census records again. Go back through the census records again and go, it depends on, you know, what year are you looking for? What era are you in? And also, did you go to the front and did you go to the back, or did you just go to that one sheet? Because again, I reference looking at, if you look at 1870 and you find your family, go to the front of those documents and go to the end. And it's typically like about 25 pages, 25 to 30 pages per census record for that county that you're looking at. Take the time to go through all 30 pages. Because I guarantee you it's something that you've probably brushed over, didn't look at. Make sure name differentiations are important. They could be with a family under that family that you're looking for. They could be on the following page with another family if you're looking for a particular person. I would study the census records. I've had to go back, and I'm a trained genealogist. I've had to go back in the documents and reread my own history, and I'm just like, wow, it was sitting right here in front of me, but I was moving too fast. Also, just to let people know that the next census to debut will be in 2021, which will be the 1950 census. So get ready for that in 2021.
Okay. The next question is, do you have a link? Do you have a link for your list of African proverbs about your family?
Are you speaking of this, what I just shared? When you say proverbs, okay, hold on. Let me just make sure. I'm wondering if we're talking about this. Are you talking about this? And when you say
Yes.
proverbs, are you?
Let's
Oh
see.
no. Well, I mean, yes, I have. Yes, yes. Just go to my website. The
Which one?
Southern. Oh, I'm sorry. I was gonna say something, but anyway, you know, me and Daniel, we close too. We good friends. Um, the southernmigration.wordpress.com. And yeah, I have quotes going all. Yes, yes, yes. I live by them. But they're all, you know, it's all over the website, and I have quotes by my people too. So
Um,
what's
you
up,
said
Stacy Fuller? What's up, Miss Purdy? Purdie. I already saw you, Mr. Henson. You always looking so serious. Miss Claiborne, thank you for joining us. Grace, Cassidy, Monica, Vernita Morgan, Sonia Garcia Hernandez. Oh Lord, like I'm really getting into Hispanic genealogy too, just to let you know about that. Geneva Chamberlain at Fisk University, Angela McNeil, Lacey Ranson Hudson, somebody's on the iPhone. Jeremiah Ellis, Patricia Stigger, Glenda, thank you. Rosalind, Lonnie Wilson, Demille Jones, Jamaica Hawkins. Thank you for joining us. And Miss L.K. Stafford from Prairie View. Thank
preview.
you.
Okay, we have a few more questions. Are
Okay.
there other migration resources such as people? Oh, I asked you that one already. What about Louisiana specific records? Someone who is looking for family members on their mother's father's side. He did not talk about them much.
Okay, can you say it one
Um,
more time?
it just says, what about Louisiana specific records? Are there any um, resources that you could recommend for someone looking for records specific to Louisiana?
Well, one thing that I would do is go to Family Search. Actually, you could go to Google and type Louisiana records, comma, Family Search, and it's going to bring you everything that they have up. So again, your keywords are going to be Louisiana genealogy records, comma, Family Search, and it's going to bring you up a template that only focuses on Louisiana research, as well as do this. Number two, go back to Google and type in Louisiana genealogy records and let Google stream that for you. And I would go through the first 10 sites on the first page. Also use the Internet Archive. Everybody on this call should have a library card, which is free through the Internet Archive. A lot of research books that you may be looking for that you thought might be like the Dallas Public Library or, you know, the Fort Worth Public Library or, you know, a research center. Make sure you get a library card with the Internet Archive and the HATHI Trust, HATHI Trust. Make sure you sign up for an account with them today. HATHI Trust. That's another good place to do research. But as far as Louisiana, there are a plethora of resources to use. Also, are you looking at different parishes or are you just looking at the state itself? You know, are you looking at different wards? So it's best to have what you know, what you're seeking organized, even if it's just like 5 things on a sheet of paper. Then, you know, start your search. And then you can also put in Google Louisiana State Genealogy. Then that's going to bring up everything that the state has to offer you. Visit your state archives. That's a free resource for you. Visit Southern University. Visit Tulane. Visit LSU, because all of these institutions have genealogical records that are free for you to use. And as a citizen, as a taxpayer, you have the right to go into those institutions and use those libraries just as anyone else. You can get a, they should have like a tech share program like we have in Texas, where you can go in and get a library card too. You can ask for a library card from a university system, and they should have a program where if they don't have what you're looking for, they can get it from another institution, and that institution will send it to the institution that you're in that moment, and you can pick it up from them. And in Texas, it's called the Tech Share program. And also, I want to say one more time about the Austin African American Book Festival. I want to give a correction. That website, again, if you're interested in attending, with the keynote speaker being Isabella Wilkerson, that website is A as in apple, A as in apple, A as in apple, B as in boy, O as in octopus, O as in octopus, K as in kite, fest.org, AAAbookfest.org. And it has been put in the chat box for you.
Okay, we have, let me see, 2 more questions. A newspaper placed by my great grandfather on Waco area convict work farm. I don't know how. How would you recommend getting more information about that? The Waco area convict work farm.
Waco area convict work farm?
It's a newspaper. I'm thinking.
Oh, I would go to Chronicling America, which is on the resource here. Chronicling America. You can research any newspaper that comes out of your mind. You could type it in that database to see if it's readily available, or you can go to newspapers.com, which has archived pretty much all the newspapers that were in existence. Or you can use Google. Google has archived a lot of African American newspapers, like the Crisis magazine, which you can get any issue for free to read and download. But those entities, Chronicling America newspaper, Chronicling America is free, which you can access via this link, or you could go to the Library of Congress and access it that way. Chronicling America, newspapers.com is going to cost you, but they offer some of their snippets for free. So I would just go on their database to see if they have that particular newspaper that you're looking for. Or you can go to Google Papers and type in the name of the newspaper and see if they've archived it. Then I would go to my public library and I would ask the reference librarian, specifically the reference librarian or the special collections librarian, if they have one. Also remember, and this is just for everyone on the call, every public library in the United States, the main library, which is located pretty much downtown for each city in the United States, has a special collections research center. So case in point, the Austin Public Library System has the Austin History Center. I'm the African American Community Archivist and Librarian at that special research library. And you would come to the Austin History Center to access archives as it pertains to African American history about your family and families, etc.
And speaking of families, last question. On one census, early 1900s, late 1800s, a woman is the sister in the next of census. She's described as the mother. The household members' relationship and ages are also changed accordingly. And all this differs from what's on the tree I was given to work from. I'm struggling to figure out which source or family relationships are correct. Any suggestions?
Remember that the enumerators, okay, remember, just if you can't remember anything else today, please remember this. You were not considered human as far as having a name, your family having a name, period, until 1870. So from 1870 until today, let's just say the enumerators got that part of the United States as far as hiring census workers. Let's say after 1975, 1980, it became a little bit more diverse where you had, other ethnicities knocking on your doors. But before that time, it was pretty much only white people. And specifically from 1870, well, pretty much from the census from the 1700s through, let's say, again, 1970, they were all white. So, in looking at the documents that you're looking in, you have to figure out the puzzle. That's what you got to do, honestly. You got to figure out the puzzle. So if one census document is saying that the mother was the mother, the other census document is saying that she was the sister, then you need to look for another set of censuses. So if you only have 2 sets, then you need to find 3 more. And you should be able to figure it out. It shouldn't be that hard. But remember that, in you not being considered human, your information was just thrown on those documents. And that's why we have to do the work today to decipher that information. But don't let it deter you from finding them and figuring out the clues. And remember, genealogy is not supposed to be easy. We were displaced when we came to these shores. So in searching for your family, it's not going to be easy. And always remember, when you get to 1870, when you're trying to get to 1869 and 1868, you are looking for the white slave owners. I'd like to give a shout out to Brian Pierce. I see Lisey, thank you for showing up. Nimbus, Natalie, 80, Patricia, Pat, Lacey, I think I said hi to you. Angela McNeil, thank you for coming.
Okay, well, those are all the questions that I have. I am going to post the feedback form again in the chat for you to provide feedback about this program. We will also email it out to you as well. And again, the presentation will be emailed, and the video will be emailed out to you, so you can go back and look through the video and see this information. I will also post Kymberly's contact information and my email in the chat as well. And I think, let me do it separately so that way it won't be combined. Try to do that. Oops, I think I just sent it to someone privately. Let me redo that again. Okay, there we go. And I believe that's all that we have for today. If there are not any more questions, I don't see anything, but I hope that you all, Kymberly, do you have any closing remarks about anything before we close out? You're muted. Let me see. Let me unmute you. Okay, try to unmute yourself. Okay, go ahead.
I'd just like to thank everybody for showing up. Thank you for showing up for yourselves, because it shows that you know, you're interested in learning more about your history and finding those people that you've been searching for, I just want you to remember that when a brick wall comes about, take a vacation. It's okay to take vacations from finding people, and, you know, start looking for someone else or start doing something else. Come back to it. And I guarantee you that if it's meant for you to find them, God is going to open up that door. The journey is going to continue to spread open for you to be able to find them. And I just hope you have a blessed Juneteenth weekend, and take care of yourselves during this time.